Welcome to the Rock Music Alliance interview sessions. I'm your host, Cole Coleman. On our show today, Randy Rhoads, remembered. On the morning of March 19, 1982, the world lost who is now considered to be one of the most respected and influential guitar players in the metal genre. It was the early days of the evolving shred style of metal guitar playing, and Randy was among the first to be fusing classical elements into his soloing. He was just 25 years old when he was killed in a tragic airplane accident. We're joined by three guests today to reflect on Randy: Grammy Award-winning guitar player Janet Robin, who actually knew Randy; photographer Don Adkins, who has snapped a few shots of Randy on stage; and touring session player Jake Faun, known for touring with David Lee Roth, currently playing a lot in Hollywood at the Ultimate Jam. Janet, let's start our conversation with you. And guys, feel free to chime in if any questions come to mind. Let me fill the audience in just a little more on Janet. You were recently a coach at the Rock Fantasy Camp featuring Alice Cooper, one of my favorites. And you're currently a member of the band The String Revolution, and which you won a Grammy with. And being a touring player, a solo artist, and quite the shredder yourself with that band Precious Metal.
Oh, that's going back. Yeah.
Tell us, how did you know Randy Rhoads?
Well, Randy was my guitar teacher. So, all of my playing, even some of my acoustic playing, but most of my electric guitar playing comes from him. I started on electric with him when I was about 10. And now, I'm only 14. So, yeah, time hasn't gone by. Yeah, 1977, I started with him.
How did you come across Randy? How did you find him to be your teacher?
So my brother and I were taking acoustic guitar lessons from a place that doesn't exist anymore called Valley Arts Guitar. That was out here in the Valley. My brother wanted to take electric guitar, and of course I followed everything my brother did. And so somebody had said something about to my mom, "You got to check out this guitar teacher. He teaches out of his mother's guitar music school called Musonia." And she loved it because it was literally around the corner from our house in North Hollywood. So my brother moved over there, and then I started on acoustic with another lady there. And then eventually I wanted to take electric guitar as well. And that's when we both started with Randy. And he was, of course, at the time in Quiet Riot, right? Which was a local LA band. They weren't, as big as they became after he passed away, right? The original Quiet Riot. And he was my guitar teacher, and I would go see him play at the Palomino, at the Starwood. These venues don't exist anymore. My parents would chaperone me. I think there were a couple of other girls that took from him, but not many. One or maybe one other. I was the only one that stayed with him. And I believe I was also the youngest. So that's how I knew Randy. And I just he was amazing. Guitar lessons were about $8, and they were 30 minutes.
He taught you both on acoustic and electric. Did he show you any?
No. He only taught me on electric, but he influenced my acoustic guitar playing as well. He was studying classical guitar, but in his lessons it was all electric. And we started on blues, and I continued to teach that way as well to some of my students. If you don't know the blues, basic blues, you can't play rock and roll. You just can't.
Blues is rock, man. That's the founding.
I mean, I don't care if you're playing death metal or whatever it is. You have to blues. And literally, my first song with him was Johnny Be Good. Yeah. So, and there was no reading, no tab reading, none of that. Scales, jamming back and forth, coming up with progressions, and he would play, then I would play, and he would show me some of his techniques. He was, I wouldn't say he was strict, but he was just very matter of fact. Like if you don't practice, you're not going to get good. I mean, and what I think what it did for me personally as a young girl, young girl tomboy who wasn't like allowed to play with any of the boys because I was a girl. My brothers wouldn't let me do anything with them. And, he just gave me this crazy self-confidence and self-esteem by not treating me any different.
Absolutely. It's
You
interesting to
know,
comment that at the time you were taking lessons, of course, I mean, females in rock were few and far between.
Nancy Wilson, you
Yeah,
know,
that's about
but
it,
she didn't
and
play Nancy. She's a friend, but she does not play lead. Okay. She only plays rhythm and acoustic, and she's fucking great. I'm just saying, I wanted to be Jimmy Page. I wanted to be, Randy or whatever. But of course, he would always say, always in his lessons, don't try to play like me. Don't try to sound like me. I'll show you these things, and then you put your own thing into it. That was a very, like, I remember it very clearly.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
terrific,
Okay, one more thing, because I did see him one more time when he got the gig with Ozzy. We were very happy for him, but he was so dedicated to teaching that in between those two tours, the one before, the second one where he died, he came home in between tours to teach his students one more time. And that was the last time I saw him.
Did you get to know his mother, Dolores?
Very well. Very well. More after he passed away, but I was intrigued by her, teaching piano. And now she was very strict. She was this little old lady, and very strict. I took like one piano lesson, and yeah, I was like frightened, but but she was actually very, very sweet. Um, and devastated. I got to know her and her family more after he passed away. I'm close to his brother Kelly and his sister Kathy. Kelly's a little ill right now. He's not doing so well. He had a stroke, and his sister Kathy, who keeps his legacy alive. But yeah, Dolores, I played at her funeral. Dee, as you know the song, she was, she was devastated. You know, he was special. He was special and humble, quiet. All he liked to do was drink Diet Coke and smoke. Why Diet Coke? I have no idea. He was this big,
It's a guitarist choice, I guess. I'm a Coke Zero right now. And that's
Yeah, it is strange. Didn't do drugs. Didn't really drink. Wasn't, he had a girlfriend. I don't know if you know this, but he was going to leave Ozzy and he was going to go back to UCLA and get his degree in classical guitar.
Oh my God, no, I've never heard
continue,
that.
yeah, and continue teaching.
I can't imagine. I wish I could know, like, what's in your head, Randy? You're gonna leave Ozzy?
I don't think he cared about, I mean, he's a performer. He was great on stage, and I know he loved it, but he got, obsessed with classical guitar, and he was an amazing teacher.
Yeah,
So
you never can tell, where a person's really coming from. I mean, from the outside, it looks like he's found a dream gig. Everything's got to be great, but on the inside, maybe he was having a really tough time. I do know that he was often very upset with Ozzy for his heavy drinking at the time. So that might have been
I
bothering
think
him.
he didn't like being around all of that craziness, and I understand that because I had a little bit of that in the later 80s when I joined Precious Metal. It's not like I don't want to have a good time or party a little bit, but I'm very serious about playing, and I want to be good at my shows. I don't want to be like, I don't want to be fucked up on stage. It's not a good look, not a good look. And then you can't play well.
Yeah.
It's just so, well, it's how much of it do you do? Like a glass or two of wine or something and then go to bed, but it's just this all night thing back then in the 80s. It was that, all night drinking or all night doing blow or whatever.
Yeah.
And now, like, I need to go to sleep, after a couple glasses of wine, I'm dead. I'm still the same. And that's probably why I'm still playing and still working, as a musician. But yeah, Randy changed my life forever. And I knew he was special. You just don't know what to call it, when you're a kid. but I was bringing my neighbors, the neighborhood kids to my lessons, and like, you got to see my guitar teacher, and honestly, I have some like cassette tapes, and I don't know where they are
Wow.
of
Yeah.
our lessons, and you can hear him talking, and I didn't tape every lesson, but there were some, and I mean, he just taught me everything on electric. But I do think that the biggest lesson was the two biggest lessons was, don't think of yourself as a female guitar player or a male guitar player. Think of yourself as a guitarist. And he
Gotcha.
helped me with that self-esteem, because that was tough for me when I was growing up, and then it became more tough in the 80s, when I was in precious metal. And the second lesson was, don't try to sound like other people. You take all these different things that you like from your favorite players and make your own thing up. And I think that's what I did. Like in the String Revolution, you may hear us arranging a particular cover, or even an original song, and it'll be like this acoustic thing going on, and all of a sudden you might hear a little Randy Rhoads pull off, or or something, and it's like, so it's still there, but yeah, I miss him, and I think he would be proud of what I'm doing, and I think he's still guiding me up there, and
Gotcha.
yeah, so
Yeah, Jake, I wanted to bring you in just for a minute. You're a guitar teacher, right?
Yeah.
What do you see today? Do you have any female students today?
Not currently. I have taught female students before. It's always interesting because it does seem to be a male-dominated field, and I wonder why that is. Maybe just because when you watch a lot of videos of musicians playing, it's just you always see guys up on stage, and typically in more guitar-orientated music, it's more rock, which is aggressive. So I don't know, maybe it just guys are just more encouraged to go into it. But we are seeing a lot more like female like artists these days, whatever genre you like. And you've got like Orianthi and obviously Jennifer Batten as well. Like, so there are some big names out there, but it is more of a male dominated field. It would be nice to have more.
Yes.
well, what's important to me as a guitar player, just in general, is being adept at. But I think because Randy was taking acoustic, classical, he wasn't teaching it to us. When I later worked with Lindsey Buckingham, who's an amazing guitar player and very adept on acoustic. Um, I think like my guitar playing broadened, and I think it's really important for guitar players to be adept in both areas. You know, shredding, rock, and acoustic guitar as well. And then you're good. If you want to go into classical or flamenco, that's another thing. I haven't gone into that, but I think if you can really explore both of those areas, you can always get work as a guitarist. It helps your writing, it helps your teaching, it helps your session work.
As a guitar player, what would you say to that, Jake?
I mean, I couldn't agree more. Like when I've been teaching students, one thing I always try and tell people is you learn all styles. Don't just stick with
That
one
too.
thing. Like I remember, like I've noticed this as well. Like especially in certain jam nights in Hollywood, which are when I first came here, that was what I did to meet people. Right? Where do you go? You go to a jam night, you meet musicians. And the more you go, you start to see certain players have their thing, right? They all get, and certain musicians get always assigned to the same songs, the same styles, the same things. And I was like, I came from England where, I grew up with, Van Halen and Def Leppard and found my way into the Steve Vais and the Malmsteens of the world. And then from there, went to university and they were like, well, now we're going to learn blues and jazz and funk and country. And then when I started playing music in England, the scene was more like R&B and funk and soul and pop in the sort of the wedding circuits, which I was doing. And it wasn't until I came to America where I found my way back into the rock world. So my whole musical journey kind of went all over the place. On my YouTube channel, I do a lot of country stuff. So my playing, I like to think I've
That's
tried to
great.
really get into a lot of different things and listen to a lot of variety of music. And yeah, as I said, I see a lot of players in certain scenes where they kind of have their thing, but they can't really do anything else. And that's great. I think it's good to specialize, but it's kind of like what you said where Randy mentioned that don't try to sound like any one person, try to sound like yourself. And what I notice with a lot of people when they play one style or genre a lot is they just start to sound like a version of that. And they may be really good at that. They may be able to shred, like you said, or play like Stevie Ray Vaughan, but there's only one Stevie Ray Vaughan, and there's only
That's
one
right.
Randy Rhoads, and there's only one Brent Mason, who name the guitar player. So I always tell people try and play as many styles as possible, but also like learn parts from other instruments on your instrument. So learn to play a saxophone solo on guitar, or some piano chord
Right.
voicings on guitar, or drum rhythms and bring them into your own playing. Just try and think of, like, be adaptive. I think I heard Guthrie Govan, maybe you guys have heard of him, an incredible player. He mentioned, like, play what you hear. So if you hear like a door opening and the creaking, try and recreate the sound on the guitar. If you hear a plane go by, try and mimic it. Just try and mimic sounds in the world, like a voice, a human voice. And I think when you do that, you really start to develop a more interesting voice for yourself on your instrument. So yeah, I think there's no more valuable tool than just trying to play a wide variety of things, even stuff you don't really like playing, because you might not notice until you start learning something the value in it. Like I remember, for example, Unzepped, for example, is a good example. I've always been a Zeppelin fan, but I was never like a super hardcore Zeppelin fan, I guess just because I grew up many decades after like Zeppelin had their heyday. So I always knew of like Whole of Love and Black Dog and Stairway and all the big songs. But it wasn't until playing in a Led Zeppelin tribute that I had to really deep dive into some of the more niche songs and stuff I hadn't heard of. And I always knew Jimmy Page was a great player, but kind of sloppy. That was his thing. That was his style. But when I started learning their parts, I was like, I get now why Zeppelin was so great. Like they were such an interesting band creatively. The kind of riffs that Jimmy Page would come up with was so unorthodox, and the combination of all the members was what really made them great. So learning things, I think, really helps you to sort of appreciate them, and then it expands your horizons. Yeah, I mean, I guess that I agree completely that it really helps to sort of learn other styles of music and play different instruments with like acoustic guitar, electric, ukulele, banjo. You try them all, see what happens. Bass guitar, because the more you can play on one instrument, it all transfers over, and especially with acoustic, I think, because typically it is harder to play than electric in some capacities. The strings tend to be the fretboard's wider and the
Bigger.
string is a bit
Yeah.
thicker, and it's a bulkier instrument. So you have to sometimes use more finger strength and more finesse to kind of get things to ring out. Whereas electric, you plug it in, you crank it up, throw on some distortion, sounds great, even if it's a mess. So if you can
Yeah.
play on a really well on acoustic, you can probably
You can't
transfer to
hide on acoustic guitar.
Oh
exactly.
boy,
There's
that's
no
the
hiding on
truth.
acoustic, so
That's the truth.
usually you can transfer back to electric quite well once you've played acoustic.
I wanted to ask you, Janet, kind of a tough thing, but where were you when you heard that Randy had been killed?
So I was in 10th grade in high school, and I was in class, and somebody came to my class and gave the teacher a note and said, you know, your mom wants you to call her go into the school office, and you got to call your mom. And I was like, oh God, like what happened? I mean, I didn't know. I wasn't expecting that. But
Yeah.
yeah, she called the school. She saw it actually on the news or read it in the newspaper, and I called her and she told me I have some, terrible news, and I started crying. And it was a tough day to get through, and nobody really understood. I had all my friends were like, what's going on? And I'm like, you don't understand. My guitar teacher, and who just gave me everything. I mean, he taught me all the basic skills, and but more the mental stuff and the psychological stuff and the connection, that I had with him.
You knew him for 5 years,
Yeah.
That's a chunk of time.
And and guitar was everything to me. You know, I continued taking from Musonia when they replaced him. I was still taking lessons. So yeah,
Yeah.
it was devastating, and then how he died. I mean, it's just so stupid.
I know.
I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? I
I
mean,
know.
Yeah.
because I don't know if you know this, but they went up twice. You know, they went up once and it was fine, and he had a new camera. He was trying to use his camera and get some new photos from up above, and then they came down no problem, and then they went up again, and the second time, the makeup artist was apparently afraid of flying. Okay, well, they talked her into going on the plane, and he went up again. He almost didn't go up because he's like, I have enough photos, but I think he wanted more.
For those who may not know, it was sort of a daredevil stunt. The
Right.
pilot was buzzing the tour bus.
Yeah.
He wanted to
Wake him up.
buzz low and wake up
Right.
Ozzy and all that stuff. So he kept circling and getting a little bit lower and a little bit lower, and he just made a flight error. One little error when you're flying low
I
to
think
the ground.
the wing like caught some tree or something and literally just plummeted into the roof of the mansion where the tour bus was parked on.
Yeah.
And it immediately, I mean, everybody was killed on impact. It just immediately blew up.
The pilot was young as well. He wasn't an older guy. He was a young
He
guy.
was he was the tour bus driver. I'm not sure if he had a pilot license or not, but
Worthwhile to mention that Rudy, Rudy Sarzo was on the bus. He had been invited to go on that flight with Randy, and he basically just said, "I'm sleeping, guys.
I'm sleeping.
Leave me alone."
That would have been me. I mean, I've been like, no, man, I'm sleeping, because all I want to do on the road is sleep, But yeah, and Rudy, I feel this crazy connection to everybody, and because I was that young girl watching Randy and Rudy and Kevin Dubrow and everybody on stage, and cut to like many, many years later in my 50s, basically, I was invited to play a Randy Rhoads Remembered show. And there were a few after that, but the first one I did was so great because I was on stage, it was packed, and Rudy was right next to me, and Kelly was the singer. That's Randy's brother, and there I am on stage with Rudy, as an older lady, and just full circle, playing a Randy song with Rudy. But I used to be that little 12-year-old girl watching them, on stage, and it's just life, It's really incredible,
I can imagine that moment. Yeah.
Yeah, especially when you dedicate your whole life to something, and you keep feeding it and not giving up, and despite rejection and all the other things that come with this crazy career, and I did mention that on stage. I said this is a full circle moment for me, and I looked over at Rudy and he looked at me, and because he didn't know me when I was a 12-year-old girl watching them, Randy knew me, but he didn't, and I got to know him more over the years. So, well, there you go.
There you go. There you
We
go.
all miss you, Randy. We all miss you, and I think he'd be incredibly humbled by how many people he's influenced. I mean,
Yeah, it's pretty stunning. We'll talk to Jake a bit about that as well. But as I interview people, yeah, he is these days. The top influence, the people cite most often as an influence and why they picked up the guitar. It's either Eddie Van Halen or Randy Rhoads. And that's the two most common thing. Well, guys, let's pause here for a word from our sponsor, and when we come back, we'll talk with Don Adkins and Jake Faun. We'll be right back. Attention guitar players, the Thimble Slide allows you to slide and fret, freeing your slide finger. The Thimble Slide is a mini guitar slide designed to be worn on the tip of your finger, about halfway down your fingernail. When worn there, you can still bend your finger, and most importantly, it's allowing enough of your fingertip through so you can still press the guitar strings. With its patented shape, you can slide and fret while wearing the Thimble Slide. Visit thimblesslide.com. That's thimblesslide.com.
Hey everyone, I'm Katie Daryl from the Top 10 Revealed, and you're listening to Rock Music Alliance. Arr!
Welcome back on Randy Rhoads Remembered on the Rock Music Alliance. Our next featured guest is photographer Don Adkins. And Don, your photography career goes back nearly as far as I can remember. And over the years, you photographed some of the biggest names in rock, including Peter Gabriel, Genesis, Queen, Motley Crue, and many, many, many more. The list goes on, including Randy Rhoads. Right. And your photos have been featured on over 25 album covers, and they appear in publications. So how did your photography career begin?
Basically started with back in the day when you could actually take cameras to big concerts, borrowed by Dad's Minolta, and at the time the fastest film was 160, which was horrible. But anyway, started taking a camera to concerts, did so-so, but started getting better and better. And then I found the local club scene, and the Starwood was the place, and the whiskey back in the heyday. And so I started, shooting those shows. Had a lucky break photographing a female artist named Diane Dimond. She was the next Kim Fowley act after the Runaways, and basically started photographing her. And then I wound up getting a lucky break and suddenly becoming her photographer. And then when you're back shooting shows, you start to meet all the opening acts and so on and so on. And so pretty soon I was like well entrenched in the music scene. And one of the other Kim Fowley groups was the Orchids. And the Orchids had their drummer who said, "Hey, you got to see have you seen my boyfriend's band?" I go, "No, who's your boyfriend?" She goes, "He has this band called London." And kept talking about that. And then finally they did a dual show together, and she introduces me to her boyfriend, Nikki Sixx. And that started that whole thing of then I was suddenly associated with London and, very close with Nikki and somewhat, the competitiveness of the peers. I started becoming close with London, and then suddenly I met Kevin Dubrow, and he said, "Well, you got to come see my band." And so I started getting invited to Kevin Dubrow shows at the Starwood and Whiskey. This was after Quiet Riot episode one. He had Dubrow, and here I was deeply entrenched with Kevin Dubrow. And then he kept talking in the past, talking about, people like, specifically got talked a lot about Randy Rhoads and everything. But he had some good guitarists in LA. He had this Carlos Cavazo guy for a while. He was very good. He had a string of good guitarists, but Randy was always foremost in his mind, and that's how I first got, to know about him. And so basically, in this is all back in 1980 September-ish timeframe when I first met him, and then went for the next year to shows. In October of '81 is then when Kevin, because he used to call me all the time on the phone, we'd talk. He goes, "Hey, I have the guys coming back for a show. I'm having all the guys from Quiet Riot joining me on stage for our show at the Whiskey, the Dubrow show." And that's when he went ahead and brought Randy and Rudy back on stage. And that's when that's the second time I actually got to see him, because a few months earlier I had photographed Randy with the Ozzy tour.
Yeah, terrific, terrific. It's in the current climate. I mean, everyone's got high definition cell phone, cameras and
Yeah.
snapping photos. So I kind of wonder that must be kind of biting into your career a little bit as a photographer. But it's interesting to think that prior to the cell phone craze, if you wanted photography, I mean, it was a big deal. You had
Yes.
to get a photographer. It was shot on film. You know,
Expensive.
yeah, and, nowhere
Yeah.
near as easy as it is now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can see on the wall over here, I have basically volumes and volumes of negatives, and then I have a whole storage of slides. So basically, I have probably 250,000 slides and negatives from those days.
Are you ever called upon to search out photos from the past like that? I mean, do publications
Yes,
call you up
yes.
and
And
say, "Hey, do you got
in
a shot
fact,
of this?"
I'm working right now on a new project that is the Too Fast for Love box set. They brought me in because I have the original photographs of Motley Crue. I did the first photography of them. In fact, one of the back there on the color shot is from the very first photo session of the group. I was in the room when they came up with the name. And so they found me, of course, because I do license a lot of images that are used for a lot of these rockumentary programs. And so I have a 7,000 line spreadsheet of everything I've ever shot and continue to shoot. And then when these agencies call up, I've scanned everything in. I can turn around archival images relatively quickly.
Yeah, that's great, man. When you photograph a concert professionally, back then or even today, do you have to get permission from the artist or the venue?
It depends on what it is. For example, I mean, I'll shoot Ultimate Jam a lot, and I do get the photo access for that thanks to Chuck Wright, where I have the wristband so I can get around and capture great people like Jake and everybody else. So I get that, but all the clubs and everything are pretty cool about it. You just do the standard thing: be respectful, don't get in people's way, don't use a flash, of course. And so I do that. But then major shows, like last week, I shot Steve Hackett. And for Steve Hackett, basically had full media access. I was the only photographer at the Orpheum last week shooting Steve Hackett. And I got to do that. And that was for a publication. And that story just came out last week in the magazine that I was supporting.
I remember when I was performing out on the scene, I played all the Hollywood clubs back then as well. But we had to pay, the artist, $50 per professional photographer to get them in and take photos, and a videographer was $100.
Yeah.
To the club. Yeah.
Yeah,
Plus
and quite
we had to
honestly,
pay.
I mean, there's one venue in LA that is horrible about that, and I won't mention the Viper Room by name, but they do charge $150 for a photographer to shoot.
Yes, I remember that.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's rough. It's rough.
It is.
Yeah. Well, let's take a look at some of the photos you've brought here on Randy Rhoads Remembered. First up is a live shot of Randy and Ozzy on stage, and it looks like it would be a great close-up shot of Ozzy if you crop that. He looks like a good
Yes.
pose to me. Yeah, do you remember which show that was?
Long Beach Arena, Ozzy Osbourne for his first tour, and basically had front row seats for that as a normal person. Brought in my camera because in those days they allowed it, and basically shot the concert. And so I got the images of a lot of images of Ozzy, a lot of Randy, of course, and then also, on the Black Sabbath in that same time period, the same thing with Ronnie James Dio and that makeup, which was really cool.
And next up here is a stunning live portrait of Randy doing a solo during a solo. And wow, I got to say, that is definitely one that I would frame and hang.
Yeah, I've got Randy stuff hanging in our famous hallway here.
I gotta buy one from you and have you sign it. I mean,
Yeah, well, the one we're looking at that's the one I would have. You do art shows, right?
I also do fine arts shows as respectable stuff. I produce a yearly fine arts festival in Hermosa Beach, so I do that your hometown, do that kind of stuff. But then I also do fine art photography. I'm shooting a couple of music artists in a couple of weeks that are well known in the LA scene, but instead I bring them in and I wrap them of LEDs and throw fog and lasers around them and do some fine art photos.
Interesting to say on that Hermosa show, by the way, guys, they do have music that they do. It's often acoustic oriented, trios and duos. Last year, Julia Lagi
Yes.
performed there with her group. And I mean, Janet, that'd be something. It'd be great to see you there. And I mean, Unzepped would be great to have there.
Absolutely.
Right, it's logistically too big, but yes.
So I was wondering, these photos we're looking at, you do art shows. Do you display your Randy Rhoads photos? Because
No,
these.
I've done 2 gallery shows that have been, Don Adkins Rock Scene, SEEN. So I've done that. I've done 2 gallery shows and heavily attended, and I did sell a lot of images there of everything. The most popular things that sell from those are the ones that nobody's seen before, like the very first Motley Crue photo and things like that, or do very well. Early Poison before CC joined, things like that. Notorious album cover work I've done, like Betsy Bitch and stuff.
I'm curious. Did you ever hear of Precious Metal? Had you ever?
No, I haven't, but I photographed you at NAMM and photographed you
Oh.
at Gritty and Pink.
Okay. Well,
I'm one of the I'm one of the guys in the audience at NAMM.
Okay.
It's always the same crazy photographers, myself, Jack Lou, and a couple of others.
All right,
Photographing.
Jack Lou. Yeah.
I always say I'm the photographer that is not Jack Lou.
Right. Okay. Okay. All right. Cool.
Well, last up is another shot of Randy looking rather calm and solemn on stage. It looks to me like he's about to start a song, or maybe he's just finished one. He's standing there muting his strings. It looks like he's rolling his volume knob. He's rolling it off or he's rolling it on.
Right.
Getting ready, or just finished. Quieting down the guitar.
Yeah,
That's
I've always been looking for, and now I'm really good at it. But I've always, looked for you because I'm also a serious music fan. I go to so many shows. You look for the moments and the moves. So, I can always anticipate when they're going to do their moves and everything. I look for those precious moments. I've had a lot of those with Jake, at the Whiskey and other venues and everything like that, where he has his moves down and he has that I don't know, he does it so cool, when he hits that I capture it right there.
I try.
Yeah.
So, Don, if someone watching would like a print of any of these photos, where can they go for that?
Yeah, you can find me. The best place is my Instagram, Don Adkins Photo. It's AD, not T. Don Adkins Photo. I'm on Instagram. And from there, you can see I post twice a day, everything from emerging bands all the way up through established talent, major acts. So a little bit of everything. I've had the good fortune to shoot just about every major band, and I'm still quite active on the LA music scene. I'm always looking for, what's the next big thing going to happen? I mean, a few years ago, you had, KCRW School Night. You'd have like Billie Eilish playing there and Gary Clark Jr. and all these people. You never know. And I'm pretty good at sniffing out acts when I think they're gonna go up high. A few that we've hosted here at our Studio 519 for the shows we do here 4 to 5 times a year. I've had several acts here that I can't get anymore because they became too big. There's two female bands right now that are really, really tight and really good live, and that's Anti-Groupies and Unpolished. Both of them have, in the last year, become quite polished, and they put
Mm,
on really good live shows.
Yeah, I like that name, Unpolished. That's
It gives me hope for the future of music.
nice.
yeah. Well, Don, thanks for bringing those photos in.
Okay.
Our next featured guest is guitarist Jake Faun, a touring player with David Lee Roth. He's often seen at the Ultimate Jam at the Whiskey in Hollywood. And last I checked, like I said, you're still performing with Unzepped. Any update on Unzepped? Are you guys performing soon?
Um, we're talking right now. Obviously, as Don knows, Chuck Wright, he used to play bass with Quiet Riot, and Alice Cooper. He's the one who put this band together a couple of years ago. We don't have anything booked at the moment. We're trying to figure some stuff out. But I actually play with another band with Chuck called the Legends of Classic Rock, which is what I've been doing mostly this year, actually, where it's like an all-star band where everybody in the band has played with someone. So Chuck's in the band, I'm in the band. We have Terry Alous, who was with XYZ and Great White. The drummer is Greg D'Angelo, who is with White Lion. In fact, he played with Ozzy for a short period when Zach Wild was in the band, actually. I think it was the early 90s. And then Chris Turbis on keys, who has done some work with Blois Cult and Leonard Skinner and I think some other bands as well. So it's like an all-star rock band, and we play once a month on one of Royal Caribbean's cruise ships as guest entertainers. So that's what I've been doing with Chuck a lot of, and that's also why our Unzepped schedule has kind of been all over the place because we're often gone every month for a week or two, and then we come back, and then we're doing stuff in LA, and then we're going out again. So yeah, we are trying to get some more Unzepped stuff, but right now, nothing in the books.
Jake, I do detect a little bit of an accent on you, so please tell us, where did you grow up at, and how did you get into playing guitar?
Well, so you have a keen ear. Yeah, I grew up in England. I'm from England, and I lived there my whole life until 2019, which is when I came out here to LA. But in terms of getting into guitar, long story short, I think I was about 11 years old, and at an age where you're just trying stuff out. I was really into rollerblading, then skateboarding, then BMXing, and just whatever. I always liked things that weren't what most people did. So I wasn't really into sort of, what everyone else wanted to do. I wanted to go and do the other things. So I think one day I was just with a friend at his house watching one of the music channels, which is what we used to have, a channel called Kerrang. And I think I saw a video for Guns N' Roses, Sweet Child of Mine came on. And we both watched it, and I just remember hearing and seeing Slash and thinking, that's pretty cool. That would be cool to do. No real kind of thought about it. Anyway, I leave, come back to his house next week just to hang out again, and I see he's got a guitar in his bedroom, and like an electric guitar. It might have been a Flying V, which is especially cool to like a 12-year-old kid. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. So I picked it up, started messing around with it. Didn't know what I was doing, but just hit the strings and pushed the buttons on the amp to see what sounds they made, and made loads of distortion, and thought this is really cool. So immediately went home to my mum and said, Mum, I want to play guitar. And I think she was quite happy to sort of hear that from me, because to hear like a young teenage boy take an interest in something that wasn't like destructive or whatever was a positive thing. So she rented me a Yamaha guitar for I think £10 a month, cost £100 total, I think. And then I started taking lessons straight away. That was never an issue with me. I was just very keen to get straight into it. So I had lessons for a couple of years from a local guitar teacher, and it was from this teacher actually I kind of discovered Ozzy and Randy Rhoads and all that kind of era of music. At the time, before I started playing, I liked music, but I had no musical skills. I just listened to whatever, and I think the bands I was listening to were kind of whatever my brother was listening to. Marilyn Manson, Nirvana, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Foo Fighters, just cool kind of current bands. I guess those guys had been around for a while already. But I started playing guitar and being exposed to more guitar-based music and learning things. And I think one lesson we were studying the verse riff to Crazy Train, that kind of sort of the major chords and the palm muting riff. And I thought, wow, that's a really cool sounding riff. It wasn't like anything else I'd heard at the time. And again, this would have been 2012 or no, not 2012, 2002, maybe 12, 13 years old. You know, 20 years after it all had come out. So it wasn't something that you were typically hearing on the radio or on TV. Again, this was pre like internet, social media was just kind of happening. So
Although that Crazy Train riff, if you break it down, it's a little bit like Steve Miller's song "Come On and Dance,"
yes, yeah,
which makes sense because Randy was listening to that stuff back then. Just FYI.
no, I love all those kind of anecdotes, and you're
Yeah.
right. Sometimes when you start learning things, you start to notice, oh, I can hear where you got that from. Like it starts to come
And the riff itself, and I'm not taking anything away from Randy's
Sure.
songwriting, but the riff itself, da 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 da, you know what that's from.
You'll have to remind me. I've told this, told this before, but what is it from?
The Exorcist theme.
Great artists imitate, no, good artists
Of course.
imitate, great artists steal. So
He
it's
made
like,
it his own. He made it his own thing.
exactly. It's what you do with it. Like Randy said, it's not, you don't play exactly like someone else does. You take it and make it your own. But yeah, I remember that lesson. I was taught how to play Crazy Train, just the riff, and from that, I think I started delving more into that world. I think I bought one of Ozzy's albums and immediately was like, this is it. I had to play all of this, you know. And I think it wasn't even like I think it was probably one of his like greatest hits albums. It wasn't even like Diary Madman or Blizzard, or one of those actual albums that was just Randy. But yeah, I remember, you know, hearing all the songs, and on that album it had all, you know, had Randy, Jake Lee, and then Zakk Wylde, you know, all the other players who'd been through his cycle on this one album. And it's interesting hearing like how the sound changed with each player, and you can really hear everyone's identity because they all had such distinctive sounds, which is what made them so great. And Ozzy was blessed, had a good keen ear for like great players. But yeah, Randy, I remember, you know, learning, you know, Crazy Train and I Don't Know, and you know, Flying High Again and Over the Mountain, all these great songs, and then the more kind of ballady ones like Diary of Goodbye to Romance. And I just loved it all because he was such an interesting musical player. In fact, I had to play D a couple of months ago for a couple of friends, Jessica and Ira Black, who got married recently. Well, they got engaged a while ago, got married recently at the Ultimate Jam night on stage. And they asked me to play D as they kind of entered the stage, as all their kind of guests came in. And I was like, no pressure on me at all, just to sort of play it, you know, in front of all these people. And Kathy Rhodes was there as well, actually, which was also pretty cool. So I had to learn how to play it, and it was just cool delving back into it. Because one of the things that, as a sort of a musician that happens is you kind of go through cycles. So when I was younger, I was like all about Ozzy. I think every day for about 2 years straight on the way to school, if my mum drove me to school, sometimes I get the train and then I had my CD player, because that's what we had back then, CD players. There was no iPhones and all that kind of stuff. But every day I would have that album and I would crank it super loud at like 7:30 in the morning driving to school. I'm surprised my mum didn't get more annoyed with us, me and my brother, because we'd have it super loud in the car, just going through the entire same album every day for 30 minutes, just completely studying. And then on the train home from school, I'd have my CD player and I had the same album in my head going through it. So I went through years of just listening to that stuff nonstop. And then as time goes on, you listen to other stuff. And then recently, I just, out of the blue, actually, I kind of started checking out Ozzy, partly because we did, you know, the Ozzy tribute show at the Whiskey, the Ultimate Jam night, because he passed away. And I started re-listening to all the old songs. And I was like, wow, it's kind of cool going back, because I can still remember everything exactly as it was. I still know everything, every note for note. And it's also interesting coming back to it from a more kind of developed perspective musically, because when I first discovered Ozzy, I was kind of just getting into guitar, been there for a couple of years, and it was all like new, exciting and challenging. And now coming back to it, it's got a new magic to it. It's like, you know, revisiting an old friend, but I can hear all the music in a different way, and relearning some of those songs and learning things in a different way, or learning them properly, I suppose, is another way, because sometimes you learn things when you first learn them, like you fake them, you kind of fake it till you make it. And then it's not until you really study it, you actually start to break it down and go, oh, so that's what he was playing there, and that's how you do that. So it's been really cool to kind of get back into a lot of the Ozzy stuff, and just from a songwriting perspective. And I think that's one of the things that makes a lot of the greats great. Like when we think of Hendrix and Jimmy Page and Randy Rhoads and Slash, you know, to the most people, they go, these are great guitar players, right? And it's like, yeah, they are. But when you understand what makes them great, it wasn't just they were technically flashy. You know, in many ways, some of them weren't that technically accomplished compared to who's out there now. Like you open up Instagram or TikTok these days, and you see some 15-year-old kid playing
It's
Cliffs of
amazing.
Dover by,
The guitar
like,
playing level that's happening out there right now is
it's insane.
truly
And I'm
phenomenal.
like, yeah, just when I think I'm making progress, is like some 5-year-old kid playing, you know, Eruption backwards with his head or something, you know, and I'm like, okay, what's the point anymore? But what makes those guys great, like the Randys, is the songwriting. I think they just came up with such cool songs, such great music, and that's really what sticks with you. Like when you listen to a song, you don't remember the technique, you remember the music, what they did with it, and then the technique is something you kind of notice after, like, oh, that was actually really hard to play how they did that. So
Yeah,
for me,
precisely.
I just love the songs, you know, and that's what kind of really drew me into Randy's playing and Ozzy, and then from then everything else that came after it.
Yeah, you can have riffs that are amazing, but you've got to be able to apply it into a song, you
Yeah.
know, for it to stick. So in that way, you know, it'll even though the technical level of guitar playing amazingly got higher. I don't like how did it do that, you know, but amazingly it got higher. But there's always room for every kind of guitar player out there. You know, it's like you can be technically an amazing player, but there's still room for just feeling and emotion and playing
Honestly,
great
I
blues.
think for me, I learned songwriting from Randy. Not only
Mm.
guitar technique and guitar stuff, but learning to incorporate a catchy riff as the beginning of a song. It's like
Yeah.
you immediately know what song that is if it's a riff that repeats. Not a lead riff, just like an actual riff that's part of the song.
Right, right. That's important, and
Very important.
he might have gotten that from classical music. You know, I don't know. I'm just guessing, but that's what you have to have your theme in songwriting. Like I said, you got to have your themes. There might be some counterpoint. There might be a sub theme that sets off the main theme. You know, and that
Mm.
makes a memorable song.
It's
Yeah.
always about the song.
Yep,
Yeah.
always.
And
Always
since you
And
about the
mentioned
song.
Alice Cooper earlier, Janet,
Yes.
back in the 70s, I still remember people saying the best guitar duo in the world was Hunter and Wagner. Alice Cooper's always had a great eye and ear for
Yes.
sniffing out great guitarists.
He has, and what a terrific human being too. I mean, at the Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp, I'm a counselor along with all kinds of other professional musicians, and a lot of the campers are adults, and their dream is, oh my God, to play on stage with Alice Cooper, and our job is to whip him in shape, into some kind of shape in 4 days. And it's not even 4 days; it's like one day, and just so supportive, and couldn't have been a nicer man, and gives back a lot. And he did talk about, his members and his band members, and choosing the right players, and somebody who's also a performer, not just technically good, because his performance is a show. It's like a theater show. I mean, his wife is in it. It's a whole thing. So, yeah, yeah. I really loved meeting him, and I really loved Rob Halford.
Mhm.
Wow.
He was also our special guest at the camp. And he can still, man, he can still sing. He's just like, and
Agreed.
he's like, Judas Priest, but
Mm.
he's like a little teddy bear, he talks quiet and nice to meet you, but then he's like,
That's often the way. The most intimidating musicians are the ones who are actually the most chill in real
right?
life, the most nerdy or whatever it may be.
Yeah, yeah, it was
Yeah.
insane.
Since we're just talking about Alice Cooper, I just want to relate this story that came up in research. You can look it up if I don't quite remember it right, but it's just a story from Randy Rhoads' older brother talking about
Kelly. Yeah.
what set off Randy. He mentions that Randy was a talented player and he was learning guitar, but it was going to see Alice Cooper at the Long Beach Arena show, I believe it was. And he said something just came over Randy during that show. He was fixated on the stage. And after a while, in Kelly's words, he became catatonic, just staring at the stage, absorbing it all in. And he says, and that is what really set him off. That's what galvanized him. It gave him focus. He thinks that what it did for him was it showed him what he could do with his guitar playing skills. You can do this. What I'm looking at on stage right now, I can do that.
Of course, that's what I felt when I saw him play at the Starwood. I mean, that's what we're supposed to be doing here,
Yeah.
helping everybody, inspiring everybody, you know. And so it was Alice that came before Ozzy with all those theatrics. He was the
Absolutely.
first one, to do that.
Mhm.
What an amazing, just what a great, yeah.
Well, just to
Great
wrap it up, guys, as guitar players and guitar teachers, just real quick now, Jake and Janet,
Mhm.
with students coming up, would you say that Randy Rhoads, at this point in time, has truly left a lasting legacy in music? Is he continuing to inspire people?
100% from my end.
Yeah, I would agree I would say yes. I think people are discovering music in new ways now that we couldn't do when we were younger. So you're seeing through social media people rediscovering things that they never would have. Like when I was growing up, just a long story short, we didn't have social media really. So I had to work really hard to find all the music I was into. I had to specifically find avenues. How can I find this and that artist? Whereas now I open up any app, and if I spend 1 minute watching an Ozzy video, the next I'm going to get flooded with all the Ozzy videos because the algorithm will think I'm watching it. So I think now you're getting a lot of young people who are being exposed to stuff like these great guitar players who they wouldn't maybe have done in a different time. And the more time you spend watching it, the more time it influences you. So and through video games and other various things. So I would say, yeah, Randy is still very much alive musically, and keeping everything going.
Janet, let me flip it back to you for just a last comment. Anything you can share as a parting thought about Randy? Anything that you can, a moment or a guitar lesson that you can say? I know you mentioned a couple things earlier, but maybe we can close with that kind of a thought.
I mean, like I said, Randy, his biggest thing that he said to me was, please don't try to play exactly like me. And you can't anyway. You'll never sound like these people. Why you can try, but it's more interesting to put your own thing into it. The last and that's funny because the last thing he said to me that I saw him in between tours, he came out and talked to my mom, and because he hadn't seen me in a while. He hadn't seen all of his students because he was on the road with Ozzy. And he came home and taught for that 1 week, and then he went back out on the road, and that's when he passed. And he came out to my mom and said, she's doing really well, because I kept taking lessons. And I think when she gets to be my age, she's going to be just as good as me. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know about that. But I think what that did was just gave me the confidence to never give up. Don't ever give up on your passion, if it happens to be an art or a sport or something. And if you want to make a living at it, you got to do all these things that we were all talking about in this. You got to learn everything about everything. If you're a photographer, you got to maybe shoot all kinds of different things. Your guitar player, you got to learn all kinds of things. And I can only imagine, really that's what I've learned from Randy, and that would be his lasting legacy, is just, come up with your own thing, work hard, practice, focus, don't try to copy, and you'll find your own sound and your own way in music.
Wonderful words, wonderful words. From Randy Rhoads through Janet Robin to all of us. Those are absolutely great ones. I'm absolutely sure he would be very proud of you, Janet.
Yeah.
Guys, that brings us to the end of our show today. My thanks to each one of you for taking the time to be a guest today on Randy Rhoads Remembered on the Rock Music Alliance.
It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
I'll close out today's episode with my own little salute to Randy. Here's the intro to Diary of a Madman. I'm Cole Coleman, and for the Rock Music Alliance and the RMA Awards, thanks for watching and listening. Visit us at rockmusicalliance.com and check out this year's RMA Awards for rock, metal, and progressive rock music.